Tonight's meeting of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission. We will look for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner John,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Coppin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Approval of minutes from the January 13th meeting. Any discussion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the January 13th meeting.
Motion by Commissioner John to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries, sorry. The review for private development of Asselford properties.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. The item before you tonight is the review of a TIF contract between the Burnsville EDA and Asselford Family Limited Partnership. The Asselford Family Limited Partnership owns a number of parcels in the MRQ. The MRQ is the 1,700 acres of redevelopment that is located north of the Bloomington border, west of 35W, south or north of 13, and east of Savage. And on the diagram below, the parcels that they are looking to develop right now is basically a parcel and then a half of the adjacent parcel. It's a little over 3 acres. Most of what you see down in here that's vacant is owned by Asselford. They have done some soil remediation to the parcels down there. They did go in about a year ago and basically remediated the soil on what would be a typical building pad for the property. In this case, they had not done the remediation. There was, if you recall, last year and the year before, there was a huge mound of dirt down in that area. This is where that dirt was. So that's why we're looking at remediation at this time. The developer, Asselford Family Limited Partnership, is looking at a little over $4 million worth of development cost to develop this property. You will see that they are estimating that their soil remediation cost could be about $600,000, and that is the item that this TIF contract is going to address. The contract will, as I said, be between the EDA and the Asselford Group. The company that will eventually be in the building is a current Burnsville business by the name of Trend Lab. Once the property is remediated and the building is all built, Trend Lab will come in and buy the property and the building, and at that time, this TIF contract will actually be assigned to Trend Lab, and Trend Lab will be the recipient of the TIF over the 20-year period of time. We are looking at about a 42,000 square foot office warehouse building for Trend Lab. The contract stipulates that they will begin the construction no later than July 1st of this year and will be completed with their construction by the end of March of next year. The TIF contract is set up as a contract for soil remediation, business growth, renovation of the area. So because of that, there are no job goals in this TIF contract. The contract does call for Trend Labs to remain in Burnsville for up to 5 years after completion of the construction and keep at least their current 25 employees there. But there's no increase of employees called for in this contract. And just so that you're aware, Trend Lab currently leases about 27,000 square feet of space on County Road 42. So they'll be moving from lease space to their own building and expanding. The amount of assistance that could be available to them over the 20-year payout period is $456,640. The assistance is going only towards the soil remediation cost. Many of the other development costs that we listed out for you are typically eligible as TIF expenses, but in the case of this contract, we're only reimbursing for the soil remediation. You may recall that the TIF 7 district, which is the district that's down there in the MRQ, is basically a soil remediation district, and the TIF money is earmarked for soil remediation and/or our infrastructure projects. So that's why it's a little bit limited. As all TIF contracts in Burnsville, this is what is referred to as a pay-go contract. What that means is we're not going to give Trend Labs a $456,000 check up front. We will pay them twice a year over the period of 20 years, and their payment will be 6 months after their tax payment. So if for some reason they did not pay their taxes, they would not get their TIF payment. If for some reason property values and the value of the building decreased and the property taxes went down, that would actually result in a lower TIF payment to them. If the property values went up and the value of the building went up and property taxes went up, they would get a higher payment, but the $456,000 would actually be paid in a lesser time frame than the 20 years. So the cap is the $456,000. There is an interesting little sidebar to all of this. When we got the special legislation to establish the TIF district down in the MRQ, we were given until the year 2018 before we had to begin to collect the TIF increments. And the idea was to give us time for development to start occurring down there. Last year, we realized that development had not moved along quite as fast as we had originally anticipated back in 2012 when we got the legislation. So we actually worked with our attorney and worked with a couple of our legislators, and we actually have an amendment that's going to the legislature this year to allow us to extend until 2020 before we do the TIF increment. Assuming that legislation passes, then Trend Lab's first TIF check would not go to them until 2020, and they are aware of that. If it doesn't pass, then their first TIF check will go to them in the year 2018. So it's a little unique that this legislation is going through the process at the same time we're working on this contract. It's a little unique that the TIF payment will be a couple years after they're actually in and operating in their building, but it's all based on the special legislation we have down there. We look at the benefits of this contract is we're going to retain one of our current businesses. That business is going to do an expansion of their building, and they are anticipating that they actually could add 2 to 3 employees because of that expansion. And then obviously this is some development in the MRQ, and as you know, that development has been going slow because our 2 main property owners have not exhausted their use as quickly as we thought. So in that Lady Bird DuPont area where we've started to focus on trying to develop, this will give us a piece of development down in there. Staff recommends that the EDC recommend that the EDA adopt the resolution approving this contract, and I would certainly stand for any questions that the Commission has.
Commissioner John?
The company that's moving in there, Trend Lab, what exactly do they do?
Commissioner, they warehouse and sell a variety of infant apparel and things like cribs and things like that. And it's my understanding that a lot of their business is done online.
Oh, okay. So it's basically warehousing is what they're looking to do there.
Yeah, of the almost 42,000 square feet of space, a little over 4,000 will actually be office. The rest will be warehousing.
Okay. And is there a reason why we don't have an increase in employees in the contract at all, or is it?
Again, because the district is set up as a soil remediation district, and because we are primarily looking to assist them in the soil remediation, that's the purpose of this. And the legislature has what's called the Business Subsidy Act that governs all business subsidy contracts like this. And it does give the EDA the option of setting job goals at 0 if there's another reason why we're giving the TIF to a project. And the other reason is the remediation and the development of the MRQ and retaining this business in Burnsville.
Okay.
So you said the remediation was just because there's a pile of dirt there that needs to be
No,
moved?
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Most of the parcels in the MRQ have peat on them.
Right.
And you can't build on top of the peat. So what they have to do is literally go in and scrape out the peat and then bring in some good dirt. For the past couple of years, that big mound of dirt that you saw sitting down there was actually dirt that Asselford's was storing during the construction of the new Viking Stadium. It was the dirt that they dug for the hole in the Viking Stadium that was out there. So they got to get all this peat out of there and then bring in all this new dirt that they can build on. And a couple of the parcels, they've already done a little normal building pad, but this one, because of that pile of dirt, wasn't worked on at the time.
What was the logic back when the TIF was set for just soil remediation? Because that was most important, that was...
Yeah, when we went and got the special legislation, we were looking at, number one, collecting some increment to do all the infrastructure improvement that we're going to need to do down in there. And if you remember the vision map, there is a hope at some time that we'll have an extension of County Road 5 going all the way through the MRQ. So we looked to collect increment on that, and because of all the peat down there, we set it up that we would also be able to use some of it to assist in some soil remediation.
Any negatives that have come up? Is there a negative? There's no negatives on here. Any negative things that have come up because for this contract?
None to my knowledge, Mr. Acting Chair.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good deal for both parties, I would say. And they're only asking for the $456,000, they're not asking for the full $600,000 they estimated?
When you take the estimated value of the new building and you take the estimated taxes they're going to pay, that 456 is the total amount of increment that's available over 20 years. So there is no way to give them more because it's not available.
I see.
If they go all the way to the 600, there will be some soil remediation that will be on their nickel. By the same token, if something happens and the estimate is high and they come in and do $300,000 worth of soil remediation, we're only going to reimburse them $300,000. So we're only going to cover the soil remediation cost up to the 456.
You said Asselford owns the property around that as well?
That's correct.
Okay, and are they planning on maintaining that property? Or is there any future plans for
Yes,
for that?
all of the vacant parcels around there are actually for sale right now.
Okay.
And they have been for sale for about a year now.
Okay.
Anything further? Those we would look for a motion to recommend the approval.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner John. You want to state? Maybe you ought to state a motion, huh?
I recommend that the EDA recommends the city council goes ahead with this TIF funding for this company and to get the development going there in the MRQ.
Okay.
Second?
Second by Commissioner Olson, sorry. Any further discussion? Was all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. I think that's our only agenda item, so I look for a motion to adjourn.
If I
Oh, I'm
could,
sorry.
Mr.
There is
Acting
updates. I'm
Chair,
sorry.
a couple of updates. The normal scheduled EDC meeting for March 9th, we should be able to cancel that meeting because of this one, and I do appreciate you adjusting your schedules to keep this, development moving. I will also forewarn you that we have had some discussions with some developers on another item, and if that moves forward, I may have to ask you for another special meeting somewhere in the end of March, beginning of April, as opposed to holding off all the way until May, and I will update you on that. You may recall at your January meeting, you approved a work plan for our STEM initiative, and at the time, I mentioned to you that council was reviewing whether they may change that STEM initiative into a workforce initiative. They have done that. They did that at their at their all-day retreat at the end of January. So the STEM initiative will no longer exist. You will no longer see STEM work plans or STEM updates in the future, and we are transitioning to an initiative to partner with and assist in any way we can workforce readiness types of projects that are going on. Lastly, the BECREC group met about mid-January. I can give you some very good news. Those folks that were at the meeting with the BECREC group, the building owners, mentioned that their vacancy rate was a very controllable factor, and actually were not interested because of that in doing a bus tour. We did discuss some other possible items that we could do, and after going over pros and cons of all those different items, the general consensus was things are pretty good right now, let's just take a year off. So there actually will not be a BECREC event this year, but again, low vacancies is obviously very good news. And that's the updates I have, Mr. Acting Chair.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Coppin, second.
Second?
Second, Commissioner Gurton, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting is adjourned.